Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Curans, and Maui Nui Venison for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of each episode. Awesome. Well, Akshay, welcome back to Austin. I guess you come here somewhat frequently as far as visiting other cities go.
It's been a good bit recently, right before Antarctica and now being back here. So thank you for having me back on, brother.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you've got the busyness doesn't end for you. It's just one thing after another. So you're working on another book right now?
Yeah, working on another book after Fearvana was the first one. Now working on the next one called Step Into the Storm. And I'm actually also co-authoring one with my wife, which will be around relationships.
Oh, cool.
She went through her own journey and how we got together and everything, and helping high performers. How do you build a thriving relationship while striving for big goals?
Yeah. I would imagine nowadays that topic in general would be of interest, just because we probably have more like dual income households, more than almost out of necessity in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So careers on both ends can make it a little bit of a kind of competing challenge to some degree in managing that variance.
Absolutely. And we went through quite the journey together. You know, she was running her business. I was training full-time for Antarctica. And even though the first year together, we had spent 3 months in Alaska, 7 weeks in Norway.
Yeah.
I was out on expeditions in Iceland and Greenland and navigating all that. She was supporting me, unbelievably supportive, while running her own business. So we learned a lot ourselves, plus love is her thing.
Yeah.
Love, relationships, she loves it. She's read hundreds of books on that topic. Mm-hmm. So it's something she really wants to support people with and help people with. Sometimes high performers struggle with that, right? We're so single-minded, you get it.
Yeah.
And you're obsessive on your craft, it can consume you. But there is a way to create a thriving relationship while also striving for your big goal. And she's also a high performer. So to your point, both people doing big things, but there's a way to manage that and build a relationship that's beautiful. We've been together 2 years now, and the whole time we've been together has been, at least in my world, solely focused on Antarctica. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah.
Only now reintegrating into normal life without that being the top priority.
Yeah. It seems to me like whether it's a career or some other hobby, if you both have a passion, it doesn't have to be the same, I don't think. But as long as there's something where it doesn't feel like to the other person, or just an understanding where like say you go for a long run and she's got something that she's passionate about that maybe you're not always doing, but she doesn't want to have to sacrifice that to be in a relationship with you. Yeah. It like kind of self-creates blocks of time where like you do your thing, she does her thing, and then you finish and you meet up and share stories and whatnot.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more that there's this kind of misconception that you have to have the same hobby. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't consider herself an outdoor person before meeting me, but she was at least adventurous enough to try. Uh-huh. So when we spent 3 months in Alaska, literally right after we got married, we did a court wedding. 2 days after getting married, we went to Alaska so I could train. And my friend had a cabin right on a frozen lake, so I'd be out there pretty much every day dragging the sled. And so she tried cross-country skiing. It's not like she wanted to do it for hours and hours like I needed to. She has no desire to spend 60 days alone in Antarctica, but she was open to at least trying it, you know? So we would cross-country ski together. She's a big dancer, so that's way outside my comfort zone. So she's gotten me into dancing. We do that together. We can play in each other's realm, and that, I think, is the key, where at least that was an important virtue for me, is someone adventurous. And adventurous does not mean only going to Antarctica or something, just at least open to try things, you know? And then we play on that edge and see wherever it takes us.
Yeah, curious minds
Exactly.
kind of like each other.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Nicole and I both run ultra marathons, so there's
so
not
cool.
a lot of friction there.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, though, is, I mean, the world of, I mean, as you know, like, I mean, you and I are both ultra runners, but we couldn't possibly be doing different types of races.
Yeah.
And Nicole and I are kind of like that too, where she tends to favor more the kind of the trail mountain type stuff. And I like the more runnable stuff. So there's ones where they cross paths nicely, where like a course like Javelina 100, we both love that course because it's very runnable, but it still has like the trail aspect.
Yeah.
And she's a good runner and has trained on flat terrain most of her life, despite kind of favoring mountain races at times in her career. But yeah, a lot of times it is kind of like, you know, she's going to support me on a short loop track event, and then I'm going to support her at like Leadville or something like that. And
that's awesome. She's doing Leadville?
She did it last year.
Oh, that's
so
epic.
yeah, this year she's doing Fat Dog 120 in the fall.
That's epic. That's no joke.
Yeah, that one will be a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be a fun experience for her.
That's very cool, man. That's cool that y'all do that together. That's really badass.
Yeah. But yeah, then on the other side of it too, it's just like, I mean, she's got a full career outside of the sport, and I've kind of built a career within the sport outside of the training and racing stuff. So we kind of have our day jobs as well, but they're both remote, so we can work from home on it, which is nice because when she's doing her stuff, I'm doing my stuff, and then we can run together at times. And
that's awesome, man.
In fact, we do this workout together from time to time when our schedules line up, where it's kind of an interval. Well, it's definitely an interval session where it's, you know, it's the type of workout where if you can have a partner, it's like anything, right? You're doing track workouts. It's like if you're doing with a group, you're probably going to get a little better quality out of it, or you just get you get an extra gear if you need it. And so I'll pace her for like a 2-minute interval or something like that. And then once she finishes, I roll right into like, say, a 1-minute interval at my intensity.
Oh, okay.
And she does her recovery jog. I stop when I finish mine, and once she catches up, we repeat it, and we do that for a certain number of rounds. And
that's very cool.
Yeah, that one's always a lot of fun. I jokingly always say, though, like when she's in really good shape and I'm not, I stay away from that workout because it just gets way more difficult for me the faster she is.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so no, it's fun. It's fun balance when you can figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, so last time you were on here, I don't remember when the exact date is. I'll put the episode number and stuff in the show notes, so if people are newer to the show and want to check that one out, because I think that was one of the... Actually, I think you might have been one of my first, if not my first, in-studio guest when I put this studio together.
Oh, cool.
So
okay.
That one was an interview I remember thinking back on as like, oh yeah, there's such a value in having the in-person conversation.
Yeah, and nothing like it.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more... They're longer usually just because I think you get deeper into conversation, and it's less like point to point. It's kind of like tangents and stuff more authentically. But yeah, that was a really fun episode. So I think if listeners didn't check that one out, that's worth following up with this one if you're on a long run and you can knock out 2 episodes in one run.
Yeah.
Or ride.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or sled push.
Or pulling a sled or dragging tires. Exactly.
Whatever you're doing. Works either way. But yeah, that one was kind of a focus on just your preparation and planning and eventual like launch of the Antarctic project. So maybe we kind of start with that, just kind of talking about what that project was all about.
Yeah. So the goal was to be the first person to do a coast-to-coast crossing of Antarctica without dogs or kites. So the mission would have taken 115 days, dragging a sled that started at 420 pounds to go 1,750 miles from coast to coast across the continent. Not only had it never been done before, it had never been attempted before. And many said it was impossible. Even people who, the company that organizes logistics and expeditions in Antarctica, they're called Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. They said that more than likely anyone who attempts this will probably fail. So it was a daunting expedition, to say the least. When we met, I was training for it, preparing for it. You were incredibly helpful, which I'm so grateful for, in planning the nutrition, because I was carrying all my food, all my supplies for the entire time. So to your point about sled dragging, I was dragging 2 sleds with all 115 days worth of food, fuel, and everything to survive out there. That was the goal. That's not how it ended up going. I got out there, and I mean, the goal was to go coast to coast, and starting on this side, which I started on, it meant you're climbing uphill from day one, uphill 420 pounds. The other side would have been about 30 days of flat terrain before you start climbing uphill. So there was a huge advantage to starting on that side, but the problem was to get to that side is about a 12-hour flight from the main base camp, Union Glacier, and that's very hard to get good weather. You need not only good weather at the place where you leave, Union Glacier, and the landing, but good weather in two separate spots where you land to refuel the plane. The plane lands in the middle of Antarctica, refuels. So that's very, very hard to do, and we didn't get the good weather, so I didn't have a choice. I had to start on the side, which meant climbing from day one, and that was brutal.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal. We also got hit with an extraordinary amount of soft snow, more so than normal. There were 3-4 other adventurers attempting different kind of records out there. Everybody failed. Expeditions that normally took 40 days took 50 days. The soft snow was brutal, and that combined with the unrelenting uphill, dragging the heaviest sled that any man's pulled from the coast of Antarctica, unsupported, it was, hard is putting it mildly. It was unforgiving. And about day 45 to day 48, I knew that the crossing would no longer be possible. The math just wasn't working out. No matter how hard I tried to get the distance I needed, I couldn't do it. It was just so hard. I mean, there were 4 times on the expedition where I would cross 20 kilometers, which was a milestone I really wanted to keep hitting. And that night it would snow. So 4 times I crossed 20 kilometers and it snowed. And then the next day, the kilometers would drop, even putting in the same hours. I mean, the first time it happened, I hit 21.9 kilometers, and it was about day, I think, 15 or 16, something around there, and it snowed tremendously, and my kilometers went from 21.9 to 17 to 14 to 13, and putting in the same hours. And on that day, the 13-kilometer day, I mean, every 3 steps, the 2 sleds would get stuck in the snow, and I'd have to kind of fight it out. And then it would get stuck again, and this would go on for 9 hours. And that day, it was a particularly hard one, to say the least. I remember usually when I stop for food and water, I just have some food, drink some water, keep going. That day, I sat on my sled, and I just looked up, and I was like, come on, give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
Just so exhausted. And it was frustrating, like those 20-kilometer days, and then next time I crossed 20, I'm like, sweet, I can keep going. And then, again, it snowed. So eventually, day 45, we knew that the crossing, the math was no longer possible. Day 50, I took my first full recovery day because the body started falling apart. And those last 10 days between day 50 and day 60, the body was crumbling. I had a few days where I was so dizzy, I fell over. I felt like I was drunk out there, just kind of stumbling. And when you're alone, it's dangerous if you faint.
Yeah.
And that was a genuine concern. If I faint, that's a huge problem. And I actually found out later that another adventurer did faint out there. And thankfully, he woke up and set up his tent and he got evacuated, but he got frostbite on his fingers and toes. I mean, he got lucky that he's alive. So that I was concerned about that. There was another day where I couldn't bring my breath down to normal. Even after 3 steps, I would be panting heavily. So my body started getting anaerobic, started cramping. And then finally on day 58, I got shooting pain in my gut. Pretty debilitating pain. And the doctor said, if it doesn't go away, we're going to have to come get you. So it went away, so I thought, all right, let me keep trying to fight. And day 59, took a recovery day. Day 60, started skiing again. And within 15, 20 minutes, the gut pain hit. And at that point, we called the expedition. So I ended up getting 60 days alone out there, got 500 miles with a 420-pound sled. So made some good distance, covering the steepest portion of the climb. So it was very, very, very hard. And what I found out later was I got diverticulitis, which is infection in the colon. And if you don't treat it with rest and antibiotics, the colon can burst, go into your bloodstream, get septic, and you die. You get what's called peritonitis, which is fatal. And actually 8 years ago, one adventurer did get killed from peritonitis because essentially pushed too hard. And on knowing that was when the gut pain hit, I knew that he had died of... I didn't know at the time that I had diverticulitis. I found out later, but I knew that it was a gut issue. So that was the thing that, all right, coming back home alive was obviously number one priority. Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting because you think of just like what the failure points are for an ultra marathon or an expedition like that, and it's like you think of just a lot of the physical, like muscle breakdown or digestive issues, but to the extreme that you have where it literally becomes life-threatening versus am I going to death march this in or not?
Yeah.
It's kind of a different set of variables to be considered.
Yeah, especially being completely alone when you're on a solo expedition, those factors are always relevant because, I mean, if for somebody to come get you, it takes a while. It's not going to just happen instantly.
Yeah. So for the other interesting thing about this is that like it wasn't one of those things where you get out there and realize, okay, this is going to be slower than I thought, therefore I take an extra 20 days to finish or whatever happens to be. Because if I remember right from when you were talking about it, there was a timeline in which you had to arrive at the other side or there just wouldn't be the resources there for you to be taken back essentially.
Yeah.
So when you got to the point where you're like, okay, this is proving to be something where that timeline's not going to match up any longer, what's the motivation to kind of keep going just to get as long as you can and then have to pull the plug anyway, but further along and say, I got as far as I could?
Yeah, that was part of it when we knew the crossing was no longer possible. Just how far can I get? And being alone out there, it's a very spiritual experience. And so I wanted to see where else I could go within, what else would be unearthed in the solitude and the hardship and the struggle. What other moments of awakenings and enlightenment could I experience in that level of hardship and solitude? You know, when you push so far out onto the edge, and you know this as well, you get to open doors into the soul that are very rarely opened. And especially in that silence, one of the most challenging things about Antarctic expeditions is for most of the journey, there's flat white nothingness. Now, there was part of it where I saw mountains, but most of it was flat white nothingness. So there's no stimuli to engage you. Every day looks the exact same. Every day you're doing the exact same thing. And that monotony, your mind wanders and you start thinking about things. And where that takes you is a fascinating journey. Some moments were pure bliss. I mean, paradoxically, even though I was completely alone, I felt more connected to all that is, to God, to myself, to my wife, to people I love, to Earth, and just these moments of absolute bliss, and then other moments of absolute hell. You know, and it becomes this beautiful paradox to experience all edges of one human life in this microcosm of time. So that was the draw. Let's see where else I might be able to go.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You'd wanna like wring that lemon or whatever dry as much as you could with what you had left. And on top of it too, it's not like, I mean, ultra marathons are expensive, but this in particular was very expensive. So it's not something you probably want to just, you want to give yourself every last ounce that you can tolerate before you decide to say, all right, let's call it.
Exactly. Yeah. To your point, we had to raise $1.1 million for the expedition, which was in many ways more brutal than the expedition itself. Even though the expedition was extremely hard, I thrive in that arena. That's my playground. That's where I like it. The pain is part of the process, obviously, you know, but the raising the $1.1 million, that was brutal. The amount of training expeditions, it took 4 years of prep for this thing to even give it a go. And as I said, it was the first time it was even attempted, let alone completed. So it was the first time pushing that far, that hard in with those conditions. So it was a brutal attempt, a beautiful life experience. And to your point, I wanted to see how far I could get, and ultimately the body broke before the mind did, which I'm proud of that. But it was still hard coming back. You know, coming back, I really struggled with the mental side of it. Just like an Olympic athlete, you devote 4 years of your life, your body, your soul, your mind, your money to this thing, one thing. And even though you know the odds are stacked against you and the odds of success are so small, it still hurt. You know, it still stung. And I debriefed with all my polar mentors, my polar coaches and friends, and there's nothing that we could have done differently to have it go any different. Gave it absolute my all, you know, but it was still really hard to sit with.
Yeah. Is there any like information or medical like diagnosis as to like potentially what happened that resulted in you getting diverticulitis? How do you say it?
Diverticulitis. Yeah, it's
a tongue twister for me.
It was a tough one for me too. Now I've gotten used to it. You know, I found out from the doctor when we came back home to Arizona where I live, met with the doctor, got checked up again. The doctors in Union Glacier, the base camp there, they were the ones who mentioned that that's probably what it was, and the doctor at home confirmed. And he said that he's had people in normal life get it, and it's caused by stress. And needless to say, I was under a good bit of it out there. Obviously, a lot of physical stress, the mental stress. That was also part of the beauty. The spiritual journey was navigating the mental stress, because every time that happened, that I would break 20 kilometers, and then it snowed. It was so frustrating that I'm trying everything I possibly can. and I'm constantly below the distances I need to be hitting, and navigating that. But then you have to bring yourself back into the present and say, all right, there's just this next day, there's this next hour, not even a next day. And then sometimes when I wake up out of my tent and I look out and it's snowed, it's going to be a horrible day ahead of you, but you still have to keep going. And this is something you can relate to as an ultra runner. You have to be present. You can't be thinking about the next day or the next 100 days or the next 20 hours or whatever it may be, Bring yourself back into the now over and over and over again to stay here, to be present. That was the whole battle, and it was constant.
Just a quick reminder that Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte source. They are offering a free sample pack with purchase for all HPO listeners. Just head over to drinklmnt.com/HPO and check out my full description of how I use Element at the end of the episode. Yeah, I wonder if it was the additional stress that eventually led to that versus, because you've done huge projects before, so like the physical and mental stress of just a big undertaking isn't something that was unfamiliar to you, but maybe just the random variables that were uncontrollable that happened to line up for this one added to that to a degree where it took you over that threshold.
I think, that combined with the fact that this was the heaviest sled. I'd pulled heavier sleds in training, but it wasn't at that level for that extended period of time. Because, when you're training, you're not going to do that. That's going to break your body, not build your body, right? So I had never pulled that much for that extended period of time going uphill and then getting hit with unbelievable amounts of soft snow. That really just put such a toll on the body and the mind. And I kept bringing my mind back to the now, to being centered. Even when I knew I couldn't do the crossing, all right, still just take it day by day, hour by hour often. I mean, every day, the first hour was pretty brutal because as your body is breaking into skiing after a night of sleep, everything would hurt, and then it would kind of get into flow. And the last few hours, almost every day, was brutal. And I kept saying, all right, those last few hours you have to fight to hit. The goal was hitting an average about 10 hours. And as the sled got lighter, I would have extended the hours to go longer. But by that time after day 50, the body just started breaking down.
And you were pulling 2 sleds, right?
2 sleds, for most of the journey. And then condensed everything into 1 sled. As I got later on.
Yeah, so it starts out at 400 plus pounds, and then it just probably, I guess, it progressively gets lighter as you get lighter
as I eat food and use fuel. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, you're really looking forward to that final stretch when you're just pulling a really light single sled, probably.
The goal was to get to the South Pole. So the South Pole is at about 9,500 feet. So I was going uphill, and after the South Pole was the halfway mark. After that, I would have been going downhill and then ending on that flat terrain, which I would have started out on had I started on the other side of Antarctica. So the goal was to get to the South Pole with enough energy and enough time to be able to now book it when your sled is lighter and you're going downhill. But I truly believe that starting from that side, I think the journey is impossible. Really? And this is someone who, I wouldn't say that lightly.
Right.
I've assessed it. I've broken it down, thought about it. I mean, for the first 2 weeks I came back, I barely slept because my mind was constantly running about analyzing the journey, debriefing the journey. I think the only way it can be pulled off is from the other side, which is just it's very dependent on luck to get the good weather window to fly out there. And if you do start on the side that I started on, you have to be blessed with some of the greatest conditions in Antarctic history to actually be able, because when I did get hard snow, I could cruise a 10-hour day, hit 22 kilometers without taking such a massive toll on my body. Nothing out there is ever easy, but it was relatively easy. So had I gotten hard snow every day, I could have, I think, still had a much better shot at pulling it off. But that's the nature of Antarctic expeditions. You're very dependent on, it is an absolutely hostile, unforgiving place. There's no life out there. There's only penguins in one corner of Antarctica, but most of Antarctica has no life. And so it is unforgiving, to say the least.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about, because obviously, weather is uncontrollable. You can't predict that. You can't change it or anything like that. Did you, I guess, since you were planning on going from the other direction originally, maybe this wasn't done, but I'd be curious, just looking at the weather patterns and seeing, okay, there's a 15% chance I get this type of condition on average versus, a 5% chance I get this extreme stuff lining up the way it did. And like, I wonder how much calculus there could be done for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I would almost certainly start on the side that I did because it was easier to get to. So I figured the odds that's where I would start. So I was mentally kind of ready for it, although the other side had the advantages of the flat. But just being that it was much easier to get to, and I knew the weather was hard to get to the other side called Bay of Whales, so I was mentally ready for a Berkner start. And Berkner Island, the place where I started, is known for soft snow. So I knew I'd get soft snow on Berkner Island. That was to be expected. But what I did not expect, and I chatted with a lot of other polar adventurers who'd done portions of the route that I was on, is on the ice shelf and the polar plateau, you almost never get soft snow. That's hard surfaces. But it just didn't go away. So after Berkner Island, I got soft snow on the ice shelf, soft snow on the polar plateau, and it wasn't until somewhere around day 50 plus that the soft snow disappeared and the surface got harder. And so that just wasn't expected. Didn't see that coming. That just hasn't really happened. But it is what it is. It offered other kinds of challenges and struggles and opportunities. Had I gotten hard snow every day, it would have been way easier, and I wouldn't have had to go through those moments of unbelievable mental and emotional turmoil that I had to tap into something in the spirit to transcend. And that transcendence is part of the spiritual journey, you know?
So is starting from the other side, is there a path forward if you were to do this again, to just to say like, okay, I'm going to set things up where I can guarantee a start from that side, or is it totally up to chance?
You can't. It's totally up to chance. That's what makes it so hard. You could theoretically, let's say, and the costs are going up every year because of fuel costs. So next year it'll be 1.2 million, let's say. And so let's say I raise the 1.2 million and I go out there to try this again. And if you don't get that start side, because when I got to Union Glacier, so I flew, firstly, we got about a week delay from flying from Chile to Antarctica because of weather. And so a week is now gone. And got to Union Glacier, we looked at the weather patterns. There was 5 days of bad weather to get to the Bay of Whales side. So I could wait 2-3 days and see if it clears out, but that's a risk because now I'm eating into the time that I have from the expedition. Whereas starting on Berkner Island, the side I did start on, we could fly out the next day. So I had no choice. I had to take it. And if I raise the $1.2 million to try it again and you don't get the window to go to Bay of Whales, it's gone. So that's what's so daunting and so challenging about it. It's very dependent on a lot of factors, a lot of luck. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and you think it's just not doable from that side now?
I don't believe it is. If somebody in my lifetime proves me wrong, awesome. I'll be the first to celebrate them and shake their hand, I think to start on the Berkner Island side and to actually successfully pull this off, you would need extremely good conditions. And even then, it's borderline. I mean, as I said, the ALE themselves, when they're told that we don't believe it can be done, more than likely you will fail. And they said there's probably 5 people on Earth who even have an expedition resume enough and a desire to do a solo crossing that would approve. Because you have to get a permit to go out there. You have to show that you have the resume to handle. It's not just like anybody can do it, right?
Yeah.
So I had enough of an expedition resume to show that I could even attempt it. But they said that more than likely anyone will probably fail.
Wow.
And even other adventurers said it's probably impossible. One of my polar mentors called it the boldest Antarctic expedition in modern times because it'd never been even attempted before. And so I'm no regrets for attempting something that's impossible, even knowing the odds stacked against you. And that was something I struggled with coming back, though. Had I done a smaller expedition, so you could do, for example, a partial crossing of Antarctica without the ice shelves and just cross the landmass. And if I'd done that, I can say with 100% certainty, I could have pulled that off. 100%. That would have been 1,750 miles versus had like half the distance. Much shorter, much less climbing, much easier to do just the landmass of Antarctica. And then the expedition is viewed as a success.
Right.
Because you did the thing. Here you're attempting something so big that's never been done, but it's now viewed as a failure.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the hard thing. I'm not going to lie, because we can all say you don't care what other people think and all that, but it kind of hits you a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a slave to what other people think, but I'd be lying if I said it entered my mind, and then thinking that. And then the world now views it as a failure, It's perceived as a failure. And the fact of the matter is, from the mathematical standpoint of I didn't hit the distance or the target, it was a failure. I didn't hit that target. You can't deny that. But that's the challenge of attempting something that big. You're more than likely going to fail. And is it still worth it? And I believe it is. It was a success to me in that getting the start line was massive at Expedition to raise the $1.1 million to train the way we did. Just getting to the start line to attempt something that had never been attempted before, to cover 500 miles, pulling a 420-pound sled, pushing the body till the body broke before the mind did. Like in all those senses, I'm damn proud of that. It was a success. It was really an expression of Fearvana at its highest, right? But it was hard to wrestle with that distinction when I came back.
Yeah, balancing kind of where the wins and losses were. Or, to some degree, it's like if you walk away from that, looking at it now being out there and thinking, okay, like the way that this is currently set up or the resources I have available to me to set it up the way that it currently is just not feasible. Like answering that question in your mind has to be a little bit of a relief too, because if you had just like decided, wow, this is a cool project, I want to be able to do it, and then like for whatever reason you decide not to because you look at the funding being insurmountable or just just self-doubt, whatever happens to kind of keep you from doing it, and you never do it, you spend the rest of your life thinking, what if I would have tried?
Exactly.
So even if sometimes at least going and trying something and learning, okay, maybe this isn't something that is doable in the way I have it set up, is a peace of mind that you can live with versus wondering what if.
Absolutely. To your point, even raising the $1.1 million, when we started getting ready for this journey, I told ALE this is what I want to do. And every polar adventurer knows this is kind of the last great adventure in Antarctica that hasn't been completed yet. People have crossed Antarctica with dogs, with kites, other various records out there, but this is the last one that hasn't been completed. So every polar adventurer kind of knows it and was eyeing it, wanted to do it. But ALE told me that I was the first person who, when I got a sense of a quote, actually tried to raise the money, because originally the quote was $750K, and it's not their fault. Like they had never put together a logistical plan,
right? So
this was the first time a logistical plan was put together for an expedition of this magnitude. So at first they were like, we estimate around $750K, and apparently when somebody else had heard the quote, they didn't even try. So we were like, all right, let's try. And then I remember this. We were in Norway training, my wife and I, and we had hit 697K when the target was 750. So we're in the home stretch. We're almost there. And then they told us the quote, the actual number is now 1.1 million. And that was soul crushing. Because now we're like, we have to raise another $250,000. And we had sleepless nights navigating that. But all of that to get to the start line, to do this, I mean, what a magnificent adventure. What an opportunity to face those struggles and keep fighting forward. And then somehow something else happens and you raise the money. I mean, now a person became my friend, Ryan Nidell. He runs this company called MIT 45, and they sponsored us with $225,000.
Oh, wow.
And right when we were on the home stretch or when we found out the number went up, and suddenly now we're boom, we're closer. So he was one of the primary sponsor of the expedition, MIT 45, and it was just it was unreal to go through that whole experience, to see the amount of people that came together. I mean, your support, the amount of people that supported this, whether it be in supporting through wisdom, through knowledge, like yourself and Dr. Mike, you guys were so helpful, or supporting even through crowdfunding. We had a crowdfunding campaign. People donated anywhere from $9 to $200,000. That was such a beautiful experience to see thousands of people coming together to believe in something, and I feel humbled to simply have been the messenger for that. Which was really, really beautiful. It's interesting. If I remember correctly from when you were on here last time, like the majority of that price tag is the fuel costs. So there's two reasons why this expedition is so expensive. One was they had to extend the season just for me. So normal Antarctic season is about 85 days. In order to pull this off, they had to extend the season. To do that, there means there had to be a skeleton crew at Union Glacier. That all comes with the costs. Keeping the plane for longer, all of that comes with the cost. So that comes with the cost. That's the number one reason why it was so expensive. The other is the flight to the other end of Antarctica, to Bay of Whales. That's the fuel cost that you're referring to. That was, from what I understand, about a $200,000 plus flight. So collectively, those two reasons are why it was so expensive. A normal, like let's say for example, I just was starting at the coast. I started it and ended at the South Pole, which there was another British adventurer, Freddie, who was doing that. So he started at the coast, ended at the South Pole, and he kind of passed me on day 20 or something like that. He passed me we had this really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Two people completely alone, and suddenly I'm skiing, and I'm like, "Hey, Freddie!" I knew he was out there, so we had a beautiful moment. Yeah, hugged each other chatted for a couple of minutes, and he went on about his way. And that journey, it's your sled was about 150 pounds lighter, but that would cost 150K. So it's just to give you context. You know, it's 10%. Not to say 150K is cheap, but it's way cheaper than 1.1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you come back from something like that, does your brain immediately go to, okay, I got to do something big now? Or is it go to, all right, I've had my fill for a while, let's change direction, and then wait for some drive to maybe do it again and just let it naturally kind of
I actually had the desire to go. So I called the evacuation on day 60. They didn't come get me until day 61 because of weather and needed to come in the plane and get. While I was sitting in my tent that day processing, I already had the desire to come back.
Yeah.
And the thought was I wouldn't come back to do a full crossing because, as I said, there's too many factors of luck involved and you could just end up losing $1 million. But what I had a desire to go back was to do Berkner to pole, so the coast to the pole. It would not be an easy journey, but my sled would start at 150 pounds lighter, so it'd be way easier, but still challenging enough to be worthy. And right now, I think there's only 8-9 people who've ever done Berkner to pole solo, so it's still a very small number of people who've done it. It still would be a 60-day journey. So that desire did come up. It was my wife and I had some challenging conversations about that. I shouldn't have brought it up 3 days after I'm back from being gone for 70 days.
Give it a year before you start planting that seed.
It was just consuming me, and I brought it up, and we had hard conversations, and my wife is absolutely incredible, so supportive. I could not be more grateful to her. But understandably, she not only doesn't want me gone for 60 days at a time, 70 days, if you include time at Union Glacier, but also the worry for my physical health and all that. So right now it's not top of mind. I'm sitting with it. I'm going to process it, be with the experience. And right now, as I said, also focus on making some money, building the brand a little bit, because it's sharing the lessons from the journey. I was essentially a sugar baby for the year and a half before Antarctica. My wife was taking care of our life. Anything I was making, I was putting to the crossing. Beyond the $1.1 million we had to raise, we funded training expeditions, travel training trips in Norway and Alaska, all of that. And so it was a very, very expensive proposition to go into all of this whole thing. And so now I'm going to focus on that a little bit, but before I even think about what might be. And obviously I'm always going to be someone who trains. So I'm back to training now, pushing myself physically, doing all of that. I'm back to running again. Well, I'm sure I'll run some ultra in the next year. I hadn't run ultras in years. I used to do that, but then I had stopped when I got into polar training and focused on polar training. But I'm back to running again now and may get into run an ultra later this year. But as of right now, focusing on the book, the brand, the lessons.
Yeah. Well, you're in a perfect spot in the Phoenix area for just jumping in random ultra marathons. It's like Airpipe probably has like 50 events at this point. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, it's a beautiful area. I just enjoy long runs out there. When I came back, weather was still gorgeous. We're not in the thick of summer right now. So I started getting back into longer runs. Did a 3-hour one right before coming here. So slowly, the first month or so, my body was in really bad shape. I would do light things that normally wouldn't even phase me, and I'd be dying. I'd be winded. So it took about a month for my body to start feeling normal again.
Yeah.
Right now, there's still a lot off. We got a blood test done, and there was a lot of problems. Kidney, liver, thyroid, prolactin high, all kinds of issues that it's just this. The doc was just, you just put yourself under an immense amount of stress.
Yeah.
So it'll resolve itself. It's nothing permanent, nothing to worry about.
It's crazy that that's the case. Like it can look like that, and then your body over a course of a month just sort of like renormalizes itself.
Yeah. And you could see a very tangible data on what was wrong when we got the blood test, which was fascinating. It was a lot more wrong than even I thought.
Yeah.
a lot of issues, a lot of numbers were off what they're supposed to be. But it's all good. I'm on some supplements, and it's normalizing.
Yeah, I guess nowadays that's probably a little bit more precise because you can go in and figure out, you're not just throwing stuff up against the wall trying to figure out what's wrong. You go in, you get tested, you find out exactly what needs the most attention, and then you supplement accordingly, and you don't have a bunch of extra stuff that could potentially be added baggage along with it.
Exactly. We're very blessed with a great doctor in Arizona that we've worked with and trust, and he's awesome, provides invaluable counsel.
He must be an ultramarathon runner.
He actually is not. He does train, but he's in the lens of not only sort of Western medicine, but Eastern as well.
Okay.
So he has this beautiful duality of playing on both those edges, naturopathic as well. So it kind of has, different takes that he incorporates into his lessons and wisdom. And he would say his most unique client for sure. Yeah, exactly. But it's always been helpful, to your point, to know what's wrong and know what to fix. And again, I'm always going to be someone like you, physically training. So I wanted to get back in the arena pretty quickly. I think I maybe took 6 days off before I started exercising again, and then it was maybe a little too soon. I was still hurting, and my wife was like, calm down. I was like, I need to do something, so
well, you also probably have like a little bit of the angst from just having it end early, where it makes you kind of almost like, once you've sort of like gotten through those first few days of just like, okay, I'm no longer like out here in the middle of nowhere in these terrible conditions, and this time of year in Phoenix is great. So
it's
like
stunning. Exactly. You want to be outside.
You're probably there's a drive probably to try to want to go out and almost redeem yourself in your mind for something or another.
You get it. Yeah.
Just a quick reminder that Krantz is my go-to pre-workout supplement for improving blood flow, increasing fat oxidation, reducing muscle damage, and delaying fatigue. Krantz leverages the research on the black currant berry extract to formulate the right dosage. Head over to currantzusa.com. That's CURRANZUSA.com to check them out, as well as all the research outlined. So one thing I wanted to ask, when you have to have a resume, like I couldn't just go and say, hey, I want to try this ice shelf to ice shelf crossing. They would laugh at me and say, don't even bother fundraising. They'd like, go out and try to maybe cross a northern state first or something like that in the middle of winter. So like when you propose that, like what types of projects are you showcasing to say like, hey, this is what I've done. This is what makes me qualified. This is why you should let me take this small chance of making this work.
I've done a 1-month crossing of Greenland. That was dragging a sled, I think 190 pounds for 350 miles across the ice cap. That's one of 3 major polar expeditions: Greenland, North Pole, and South Pole. So I had done a crossing of Greenland. When I started doing all this, I'd gone to Antarctica 4 years ago, where my team and I became one of only 26 people to climb up this glacier called the Axel Heiberg. That's where, if you remember, I lost 2 fingers to frostbite, but I had been experienced Antarctica. I'd done multiple solo expeditions and other expeditions in the Arctic, in northern Norway, in Svalbard. I'd done a solo expedition in Iceland. So I'd showed that I'm competent in the polar regions and on solo trips. So totally I've spent right now, including Antarctica, about 100 days solo in the polar regions, 100 days completely alone. And then I'd also shown physically I'd run ultramarathons. I'd been in the Marine Corps. So physically, and the mental aspect of all of those, but specifically they want to see a combination of that and your ability to handle the polar skills. Like in your case, for example, you're obviously extremely fit. You have the mental wherewithal to handle long and distances, but they would want to make sure you can handle the polar, the specific technical skills of being able to survive out there.
My resume would be like, well, I ran in a 50 below wind chill day in Wisconsin one winter. Does that count for anything? It's like, it was only 11 miles. Oh, come on, man, get back out there.
Yeah, because that's part of it, obviously, is the physical thing. But, handling the polar regions technically is its own nuance and skills. Working with the stove, the tent, setting up, breaking down the tent when the wind's hammering you. Can you do all of those things? And like anything, it's practice. I had done it enough by the time I got to Antarctica that I was never in any real danger out there. I mean, I did, while I was cursed with tremendous soft snow, I was also blessed with epic weather. Most of the days I got sun out, clear skies, but I did have a handful of whiteouts and a handful of very windy days. And I'm comfortable enough to not only mentally be okay when the wind's howling at you, but to set up my tent and break down my tent in those conditions. Because I've done it before, just like anything. It's a skill set.
Yeah. Do they inquire at all about like what you're going to do to prepare for it? Like because I know you went on a few different kind of training camps. Essentially, are they looking for that too? Like that you're actually checking your
checking your training. I'd constantly been keeping them in the loop. Hey, I'm spending 3 months
Yeah.
in Alaska. Here's what I'm doing. In Alaska, I got to the point that I was dragging up to a 530-pound sled. So way heavier, 100 pounds heavier than what I dragged in Antarctica, just as training. So I told them constantly. I did the Iceland expedition last year as well, and all of that. So I was keeping them in the loop to
They
show
like follow
them.
you on Strava.
Yeah, and they do. They check on Instagram to make sure, see what you're up to. Even when I did Denali 3 years ago now, I didn't realize they would do this, but they called the Denali guide that I went with just to see how I performed on the mountain.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know, and I think it's a good thing they do that. They
Yeah.
should do that, to
Yeah.
make sure that when something got bad on the mountain, I didn't break down crying or something, that I was okay.
Yeah. We were carrying this guy up on our back.
Exactly. So I'm really impressed, and I'm glad they did that. That's one of the problems now you see in mountaineering. This is one of the big complaints that people have around Everest. People who have no business being on the mountain are going there.
Yeah.
And things go wrong, So I think with polar travel, you're not seeing that yet. That's the distinction between polar travel and mountaineering. It draws much less crowds than mountaineering does, and they're doing a really good job of vetting you, especially if you're attempting a solo expedition. It's another thing if you're doing a guided expedition, your resume doesn't have to be as stacked, but if you're doing solo, because if I do something wrong out there, somebody has to risk their life to come get me, and that's not fair to do that unless you know what you're doing. Like in my case, when they came and got me, it was a safe evac and all those kind of things, and it was a very extreme scenario. I had pushed the body to the brink of death, but I was comfortable enough solo, right? And I needed to be. Otherwise, it's not fair to other people as well.
So in those, it was like 2 days when you kind of called in before they were able to pick you up.
One day, yeah, 24
one day,
hours, yeah.
24 hours.
Yeah.
So you have all your supplies, and you can just rifle through them if you need
Exactly.
to at that point. But you're just hanging out in the tent at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sleeping probably. As much
Yeah,
as you
sleeping as much as possible. I honestly didn't sleep much because it was, even though I knew the crossing was over at that point, there was a bit of finality to when you're finally called the evac. And so just processing that, thinking about it, chatting with my wife on the sat phone, just waiting it out. I had enough supplies because I still had 55 days more worth of food. So I could have been out there theoretically for 55 days if I wanted to.
Yeah, it would be quite a camping trip.
It would have been, exactly. And that even at the end, there was a part of me that it was kind of like, there's no, if let's say I'd stayed in my tent for another week, could I have potentially recovered more to keep going? Maybe, but I didn't want to just be out there sitting in my tent. I wanted to move. I wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
And at that point, the crossing was out of the question anyway. Had I been 1 day away from the crossing or something, would I have gone? Obviously.
Yeah.
I would have pushed probably and seen what I could do to hit that home stretch. But I was so far away from the crossing, there was not even a chance.
Yeah. Did that guy that you crossed, I think you said you were 20 days in?
Something like
so
that,
he must
yeah.
have been getting close to his final
So
destination.
he was getting close. He did end up reaching the pole. I think it was in 58 or 60 days. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, he reached the pole. Super nice guy, great guy. We were kind of in touch on sat phone, texting each other a little bit here and there, just sharing intel, and an awesome guy. And he's, I think, like I said, only less than 10. I believe it's 9 people who've done Berkner to pole solo. So it's still a hard expedition. Nothing in Antarctica is easy. It's one of the harder ones. But the draw for me to go back and potentially do that would be, it'd still be challenging enough, but doable. Like I feel confident I could do it, but it would still not be easy. And my sled would be 150 pounds lighter to start with.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer that the financial hurdle's so high for that. I mean, it has to be, otherwise the challenge isn't there really, because in order for it to be the grandness of the challenge, there has to be a lot of hurdles to get there and to be out there, and that sort of almost self-feeds the expense. But I always wonder, like, you get some of these like guides in Nepal or something like that who they're just living subsistence lives essentially, but probably about as good of a candidate as possible. It's like, at what point does some like hyper billionaire just say, like, you know what, I'm just gonna like take a few $1 million and grab a few of those guys, say like, hey, I know you probably enjoy your life to some degree, but let's turn you into a professional athlete and just see what we can do here.
The Sherpas in Nepal, they're some of the greatest, strongest mountaineers on earth. They're legends. I mean, I've seen some of them even when I've done some mountaineering trips in Nepal. I was fit. I was not fit. And they'd be flying past me with way more weight in flip-flops, So they're just savages. They're so strong. I know that's the mountaineering regions, but they're very, very strong mountaineers. And I wonder, I mean, again, I'm super curious to see people now, like, again, there's a handful of polar adventurers eyeing this. I'm super curious to see what else if anybody else attempts this, how it'll play out. And I'd be the first to support them. In fact, I already have a few polar adventurers reaching out. I'm sharing my intel. It's a very supportive community.
Yeah.
So many people supported me, and now I want to give back and share everything I learned along the way.
Well, I mean, if someone does go and do it, like, and then it proves that there is a path forward here, now you maybe consider trying it again.
My wife might murder me, but we'll cross that bridge down the road. Yeah. I mean, again, there's a big world out there, a lot of hard things to do, a lot of beautiful things to do. And as I said, there's a small desire to go back to even do the pole expedition. But, taking it kind of one step at a time, at least in where to focus the energy, So I'm always going to be training. My wife even has, she kind of jokes that she has PTSD from the word training because I use the word training instead of working out.
Yeah.
So she's like, you're working out. You're not training. I'm like, I'm always training.
When you start saying training, she starts thinking there's a project
exactly.
in your mind.
It seems like that there's something you're training for, but it's just my DNA. I just always say training, So even if there's nothing to kind of specific to train for, I'm training. But right now, still just staying fit. I lost about 17 pounds out there. As you know, I'd put on a lot of fat.
Yeah.
And then the first week or 2 weeks I came back, I didn't care. I was like, I'm just going to eat all the foods that I missed. So I put on back about 7-8 pounds. And now I'm starting to lose a little bit again and kind of getting into a more regimented diet, not just the polar diet that I had before where I was just eating everything to get fat, essentially.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point, too, because you had to gain quite a bit of weight just to make it doable in terms of essentially turning yourself into a mobile aid station.
Exactly.
And then, you don't get to the finish line, so you retain a lot of that mobile aid station. But the thing I'm interested in is, because it's not like you're eating little and you're burning you're burning a lot of body fat out there to lose 17 pounds, but you're getting in sort of a habit and a rotation of eating probably 7, 8, 9,000 calories a day.
I was eating 5,700.
5,700, okay.
Because I had to carry all of it. So theoretically, you can take as much as you want, but that sled gets heavier and heavier.
Right. Yeah. So when you get back, then is it it's probably not just a switch where you're like, okay, well now I'm just kind of relaxing and maybe burning a couple thousand calories a day. Your mind and digestive system is probably still looking towards 5,000-6,000 calories. And what's the drive to eat like, I guess?
First few days, it was pretty heavy. Definitely feeling more pangs of hunger than normal.
Yeah.
So first few days, it was pretty heavy. But then it normalized, at least it felt like fairly quickly. And then eating, obviously not eating 4,000 or 5,000 at that point, but I was eating kind of whatever I wanted because I was eating all the foods I missed.
Yeah.
That I just was craving being back in civilization, kind of enjoying life, enjoying the foods that I missed before I started being more conscious.
Yeah.
But when I ran ultras many, many years ago, I was 135 pounds. I got to 185 before Antarctica. So I put on a ton. And I'm naturally not a big guy. Even right now, I'm about 173. But a lot of it is not just fat. It's a lot more muscle that I've put on as well. But I don't think I'll ever go back to ultra runner skinny, at least not anytime soon. I think I'll maintain some muscle mass. And I think probably get to the point maybe 160, 170, which is still bigger than kind of what most of my life has been and what I've been used to. But my wife and I, for example, we're going to do an actual wedding. Last time we just did a court wedding. So a ceremony later this year. So we've come up with a mission, and my mission personally is I'm just going to get jacked.
And keep that muscle
ripped.
around.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so get ripped for the wedding. So that's my kind of training target, because why not?
That's cool.
Yeah.
So when you were preparing for this, it was a lot of kind of, I would say, non-traditional training techniques because you're getting ready to pull a sled at very low intensities through what it probably equates to beach sand essentially.
Yeah.
And now that you kind of have just all the options on the table because you're not specifying, have you started gravitating towards any other type of training activity that has just sounded more fun than others?
I do love endurance stuff. So I'm now running. I'm still getting back to longer runs. I spend a lot of time hiking in the stepper. And now I've added more strength training into the regimen as well. So definitely doing more strength training. And strength training in parts that, before, I wouldn't necessarily work out my chest a lot because who cares,
Yeah.
But now I'm getting into the more traditional bodybuilding type strength training, with just the intention of purely aesthetics, just because right now it's kind of fun in its own right to get the aesthetic goal of looking ripped. But I always love endurance. So like endurance is going to be my jam for, I think, for the rest of my life. I love the long, slow stuff because that, as you can relate, is the mental challenge.
Yeah.
You know, when I do short, high intensity intervals, it's way more suffering in a very condensed period of time. But when you do long, slow suffering, you have to deal with the mental challenge of knowing that you still have hours of this left.
Yeah.
And that I enjoy. That's what it fuels me more than anything else. So doing the short interval sessions, like I'm doing a lot of interval sessions on the stepper, and it's super fun, very, very hard, drenched in sweat after it. But and I'm enjoying that kind of thing as well. But I love the mental battle of the long, slow stuff. Mm-hmm. That lights me up, and seeing where the mind can go.
Yeah. If you really wanted to mess with the endurance and strength world communities and rile them up, you should take in like a picture at your fattest. And then like when you get jacked, take a picture and be like, this is what I look like when I was training for endurance. And this is what I look like.
I love it. I think we do have some before and we'll have some after shots. Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always found that when you go through not necessarily like one training cycle where it's very specific or and sometimes monotonous, if you do that enough times, there's just such a value in sort of doing something different for a training cycle and then going back to the thing that maybe you liked the most anyway.
Yeah.
It just kind of resets the mind. Like when I ran my fastest 100-miler, that came off the back end of a 6-month block where I was training for the San Diego 100, which is more trail mountainous. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I kind of needed that reset because I had a race that I had done prior to that where I was just kind of like, you know what? Like I love running flat stuff. I still want to try to run a faster 100-miler, but I kind of need a break from it mentally.
I got you.
And then when
sense.
And so then like, instead of running around the track for a long run or on straight flat canal pass, I was going to like Mount Ord. I don't know if you've been out to Mount Ord yet, over just like maybe an hour outside of Phoenix, maybe a little less than an hour outside of Phoenix.
I've not, yeah.
You should check out Mount Ord. It's actually, fun fact, I think, if I remember right, it's the highest per capita congestion of mountain lions. Which you probably won't see them on the Mount Ord path, but that area, I guess, has a lot of them.
Cool.
But essentially what's cool about it is you park down at the bottom, and it's a 7.5-mile run, about almost 5,000 feet climb up to the top. And they have like a big observation tower, I think it's maybe a cell tower or something like that up there.
Yeah.
And then you come back down. So when I was training for San Diego 100, I would do like on a long run weekend, I would go up it, come back down, hit my car as an aid station, up and back down again, and get like a 30-mile long run with like almost 10,000 feet of climbing and descending.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it really calluses the legs for the trails when you can do that. So
I bet.
Yeah, if you get sick of the stair stepper, you can do 7.5 miles up and then come back down. But you can like camp out there and stuff too. Like,
that's cool.
There's a spot kind of midway up where there's some campsites and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting spot that I didn't know about it when. I wish I would have known about it when I got into Western States kind of late in the game through a sponsorship spot in 2018.
Nice.
And we had just moved to Phoenix that winter, so I was still kind of figuring the lay of the land and where the training spots were and stuff.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I wish I would have known about that before, because that would have been a great
I'll have to check that out.
A great Western
States.
States.
I haven't heard of that one. That's good to know.
Yeah, check that spot out when you get a chance to head out there.
Okay.
I can't remember why I brought that up. Oh, because just switching things up. So like that was like such a different kind of training program and a lot of newness, and probably after a lot of the flat running too, just good mechanical variance where you can dial up a zone 2 effort at a low impact with a little more strength component going up that climb.
Yeah.
And then when I returned back to the flats in training, I just felt like I was pretty durable and still pretty fast.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then you kind of carry in that strength into kind of a speed phase, and it's just everything kind of works a little better.
That makes a lot of sense. Right now I'm enjoying the variety of not doing tire dragging.
Right. Yeah.
So that's been because that was my world for years, and that sucked. So I did it because I had to be done. But so running is kind of a new like my variant for right now, at least, because I wasn't even running at all. I was just doing tire dragging as my cardio before Antarctica, tire dragging and hiking. So this is running. It's fun. It's been fun getting back into running.
Yeah, I bet. What part of Phoenix are you guys in?
In Scottsdale.
Okay.
Scottsdale.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're kind of near the McDowells then?
Yes.
Nice.
Very near McDowell.
Yeah, there's so much good trail out there.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So really enjoying that. I like that, again, what draws me is the mental side more than anything else. That's the thing that lights me up the most is with the endurance, you're forced to go within to hear that inner dialogue. Studying the mental side of mental mastery is everything. My whole book, Fearvana, is based on that. The next book is building on that, and that's what lights me up. That's why I love the endurance side. That's why I mentioned in Antarctica, when you're in the flat white nothingness, to be with the stillness of what's up here, that's the most fascinating element of pursuing these hard things to me.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder, Maui Nui venison is one of my favorite protein sources. The reason? They have balanced an invasive species, the axis deer, that is devastating to the Maui habitat if not kept in check, all while providing some of the most nutrient-dense meat source you will find. Consider letting them know that you heard of them from me by taking a look at their website at mauinuivenison.com/bitter. You can also check out the full description of how I use Maui Nui venison at the end of the episode. Yeah, I remember the last time when you were talking about the darkness retreat that you did to prepare the mind, and for that sort of like no exposure to the visually anyway.
Yeah.
And how long was your...
The first time I did the darkness, I spent 7 days in the darkness, and the second time it was 10 days.
Okay, wow.
10 days alone in pitch darkness, can't see your hand in front of you, and just going within. And I mean, in the darkness, in that level, you start seeing lights that are as real and as bright as any of the lights here. They say that in that level of darkness, your brain starts to release DMT, hence these very hallucinogenic type experiences. But just to sit still with yourself there, there's nowhere external for consciousness to go, to latch onto. So you open doors within yourself. And part of the beauty of these experiences is you don't know what's going to come out on the other side of those doors. It's not just sunshine and rainbows and unicorns.
Right.
It's the darkness. It's the demons. And you have to face that. It rises to the surface. And I may have even shared this last time I was here, but one of my favorite quotes that really illustrates the process of mental mastery is from Carl Jung, who says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And all these journeys from the darkness to Antarctica, it's making the unconscious conscious. It's bringing the darkness to the surface, to face it, to be with it, to use it. And that's what draws me. In these experiences, it really is a very spiritual experience because you see how both on a very literal sense, when I was in the dark, but on a figurative sense, how darkness and light can coexist. When I push out in nature, these experiences, they show you how the dualities that encompass the human experience can actually coexist as one. And what I mean by that, actually, it developed into a concept that I now call the paradox of oneness. And what this is the paradox of oneness is the realization that all opposites that encompass the human experience, pain and pleasure, light and dark, masculine, feminine, ego, humility, life and death, so on and so forth, all these opposites, they are not separate. They are, in fact, two parts of the same whole. And it's the conceptual mind, it's our rational mind that creates divisions, that creates duality. But true inner peace, true freedom, true mastery comes from not either resisting or clinging to one edge, but embracing both sides and exploring both edges. And I'll give you a concrete example of what I mean by that. In Antarctica, you feel so humble out there, so humble. I remember looking out one day when I had just climbed the very steepest portion of the route, a place called the Wujek Ridge, and looking out at this, completely alone for hundreds of miles. Way in the distance, I can see my small tent, just a dot in the distance. And I'm so small in this nothingness. But when I'm being hammered by a polar storm, I also feel so powerful. In that moment, it's godlike. It's this feeling, and you get to feel both these dualities coexisting. You feel all powerful and yet nothing simultaneously. And that's been this whole journey of mine is seeing and experiencing this awakening, this moment of two seemingly contradictory forces, seeing how they can coexist. In the darkness, in a very literal sense, I saw the brightest light I've ever seen in my entire life in the dark. It was so bright, it was blinding. I was covering my eyes. And you can literally feel and experience and know that they are two sides of the same whole.
Yeah. Is there a certain, a crossover time or is it probably varies from experience or person to person, but I imagine the first 6 hours, you're not getting any of these experiences like that, and it has to escalate to a point before you start kind of finding that. Is there, what is that kind of early stage of the darkness retreat like?
The early stage, to your point, you're just kind of acclimatizing into the darkness. A lot of us are in some degree of sleep debt, so I think I just slept a ton for the first day and a half. Yeah. But even after that, you're starting to now get used to it. You have to, the way I like to think of it is you have to earn the right to get those experiences. And that means riding through the first 3, 4, 5 days, which are hard. There's moments of boredom, moments of hardship, but in that stillness. But once you move through that, then you expose yourself to those moments of, call it what you want, awakening, enlightenment, experiencing pure oneness. You know, you get to see all of this, even in Antarctica, like the other duality of control and surrender, right? You have to surrender to Antarctica. There, you can't control anything that happens out there. But paradoxically, you feel more in control because you're exercising the muscle of control. I control my reality. Over here, you don't kind of think about control. You just go about, there's rules and civilization. Over there, it's on me to set up my tent the right way. And if I do it the right way, I can now survive in that evening, and even if the wind is howling. So you exercise the muscle of control so you feel in control. Even the duality of pain and pleasure. I told you about those moments of pure bliss. And often they're while I'm in tremendous pain. I'm sure you can relate to this when you run ultras, right? Yes, there are some terrible moments, but there's these moments of glimpses of pure oneness, of transcendence. And so I think, but they come after you acclimate into that new reality, and it becomes your reality. And then you get to transcend. And that transcendence is what draws me. It's not the suffering in and of itself, whether it be running ultras or doing these expeditions on the edge. The suffering is the means. It's not the purpose. It's the door. It's what it gives me access to. And that access is the shedding of the masks that we wear. When you're in this world, when you engage with people, there's a mask. There's the constructs that shape our reality. In that suffering, in that isolation, in that hardship, in that silence, the stillness, all that illusion is gone. The constructs of reality are gone. The masks we wear are gone. And you get to experience a truly raw experience that is full experience beyond conceptual thought. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you put words to an experience, it's inherently coming from conceptual thought. So even in a very simple way, when I see this, I think it's a black curtain. And how do I know that that's what it is? Because at a young age, I've been taught this thing I'm seeing is called the curtain, and that color I'm seeing is black. So I've been taught these things, so it's based on conceptual minds, on constructs of this is how you perceive reality. But there's a moment between the constructs of our reality and pure reality. And when you're out on the edge, you get to experience pure reality. And that pure reality is oneness, beyond all constructs. And you see non-dualism exist, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, when I try to compare that to just some of the ultra stuff I've done, you sort of have this process where even a smooth race that goes like, okay, I executed that well and I hit my goals and things generally worked the way I wanted them to, you still have that ebb and flow between like, oh, I feel really good right now, like better than I probably should. And that might come at 60 miles into a 100-miler or something like that, when there's obviously fatigue in your legs and your mind, but for whatever reason you feel better at mile 60 than you did at mile 1.
Yeah.
And then you also have the reverse of that where it's like, okay, you hit a rough patch and you're just like, I don't know if I can do this. My paces are slower. What if this continues for the rest of the race and I have a terrible finish? And it's sort of like in either of those experiences, you have to recognize the finite nature of them, where it's like, okay, I'm probably not going to feel this great for the remainder of the race.
Yeah.
So be in the moment, enjoy it while it lasts, but know you're going to come down from this. And similarly, when you're in that rough patch, you have to be able to use that same mindset of like, okay, this really sucks right now.
Yeah.
And I need to weather this storm, and then it will feel better. It's not going to feel like this or progressively worse for the rest of the time. And then I think the better you get at just understanding and being able to tolerate those back and forths, the further you can, or the more of them you can do over the course of an event. And the more of those you can do over the course of an event just means usually the quicker you're going to get to the finish line.
Absolutely.
Or if it's a timed event, the further you're going to go within that framework.
Absolutely. This comes back to the point of what I mentioned earlier of not resisting or clinging to what is. Acceptance of isness is the foundation to freedom from all unnecessary suffering. And unnecessary suffering. So in ultras, in this, you're going to suffer. But it's the dialogue that happens in your mind that creates unnecessary suffering and adds suffering onto the suffering if you're not careful. So in my book, Fearvana, I call this second dart syndrome. And what that is Buddha said we're all stabbed by the two darts of suffering. The first dart is the one you don't control. So your legs are hurting when you're running, whatever it may be. The second dart is when you spiral into that dialogue. What's wrong with me? I'm feeling weak. This is like, I can't do this. God hates me. Whatever that conversation that we can all relate to. In every context of life, we do this. We'll go into that spiral in our head. And if you don't pause that spiral, if you don't become aware of it to stop it, that's when it just gets worse and worse and worse and feeds off the negativity. That's what I call second dart syndrome. And so when you stop and you acknowledge that the first dart, and you don't have to get caught up in the semantics of, is the first dart the external thing or is it the thought? Because most of our thoughts we don't control. They just arise. You know, as you said, when you're running, you'll recognize, oh, this will end, or whatever it may be. So the first thought arises, but as soon as I pause that stream, now I've taken control of the second dart. And I can say, got it. I will just accept what is. So even, for example, when I'm in Antarctica, if I'm feeling frustrated, instead of beating myself up for feeling that, you know, feeling a moment of frustration, feeling a moment of weakness, whatever it may be, pause. Let me accept it. Let me be with it. Acceptance of isness. I'm not going to resist to or cling to what is. I'm just going to be with it fully. And from that place, you can now create your own reality.
Yeah. So is there any like framework that you try to use in those situations with that second dart where it's like, okay, I'm trying to envision, like, if you're sitting there before like a race and you're thinking, okay, inevitably there's going to be suffering. And when that suffering arrives, I'll have to navigate the controllable second dart. Are you thinking of like, okay, here's the message I'm going to give myself to do that? Or is it something you have to sort of adjust and be flexible around when it arrives in order to kind of control that narrative?
You can pre-plan certain things, like have certain mantras you use that guide you. But a lot of times, once it arises, it's just bringing yourself into the pure presence and awareness of the isness. So in Antarctica, sometimes I would do this. I would say, thank you, God, for these perfect conditions. Now, were these conditions perfect? I would have much preferred harder snow, but they were perfect because it can't be anything other than what it is. Everything. It cannot be anything other than what it is. And therefore, it is perfect. So that's a simple mantra to train yourself to accept what is without demonizing what is. And also sometimes, you know, that moment I mentioned when I sat down on my sled on a really hard day, I got a little victim-y. I started feeling sorry for myself for a moment, but that's okay. It allowed me to move through it. So I'm not saying I lived in that. I barely spent 30 seconds to a minute, if that. But just saying, oh, this sucks. Give me a break. And then saying, all right, stop feeling sorry for myself. I chose to be here. It's a luxury to be here. Let me keep moving forward. Bring myself back into the now. Sometimes it's as simple as I'll just say, be here now. Be here now. And if you find yourself, your first dart going into the pain cave, as every ultra runner knows, is digging it deeper into it. You know, sometimes I've even said things. I remember once when I ran a 50-miler around a cul-de-sac when COVID first hit. A lot of people said, I can't go to gyms, I can't train, parks are closed. So to inspire people, I did 50 miles just around a cul-de-sac right around my right outside my apartment. It was like 1,000+ loops. It was 0.05 mile, just this cul-de-sac going around to show there's always opportunities. And I remember when my shin started hurting on that run, I actually started praying for things to get worse. Bring it on. Bring on every bit of pain you could possibly throw on me. Nothing's going to break me. And so you're now seizing control of that second dart to channel it into something. You know, so sometimes you use the weapon of going deeper into pain, other times escaping the pain. Even in Antarctica, very often I didn't have any music or audiobooks, just being with the mind. Other times I used music to escape. But neither is good, bad, or right, wrong. And here's the thing too, right? That's coming back to that paradox of oneness. These are two seemingly contradictory weapons to navigate hardship, but they both have their place. It's not that one is bad or one is worse. The more you play in the arena, the more you can figure out which weapon actually works for you. So actually on fearvana.com, if somebody's interested, I have a whole tool called 25 Weapons to Navigate the Pain Cave. And there's 25 different weapons that I've figured out over the years of doing these hard things to navigate not just a physical pain of doing a endurance feat, but even mental, emotional pain. And sometimes it's gratitude. Sometimes it's escaping it. Sometimes it's going deeper into it. You know, sometimes it's being with it fully and just sitting with it, not resisting, not clinging. But there's so many different weapons that you can exercise in the moment to keep moving forward in the face of the struggle. That's ultimately what it's about. But I think at the core, even if you find yourself getting into that mode of resisting or clinging, the mission is to bring it back to center quickly. You know, it happens to the best of us. That was a realization for me in Antarctica. And I think I actually mentioned you on one of my audio updates where the greats, you know, I always thought when I first got in ultra running that the greats like yourself, they don't feel moments of mental hardship. They're just somehow pushing through no matter what, until I realized the more I heard that everybody goes through it. You know, even I read this, I saw this clip from Novak Djokovic, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, talked about he has moments of doubt. Even he, when he misses a few shots, will spiral a little bit. But the key for that I think separates the greats from those who don't push past those hardships and those limits is the ability to bring yourself back into center when your mind strays, and do it rapidly. But that is about what the second art is all about.
Yeah, and the quicker you can do that, the better.
Exactly.
When you're under a time pressure like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, like what you described, the most kind of transparent version of that I've had was when I ran my fastest 100-miler. It kind of played out exactly the way you described it, where I was about 40 miles in, and I had, when I go into these races on these short loops, like this was a 443-meter loop, I know, like, all right, here's the fastest I should be going on any loop. If I go faster than that, I'm probably eating into myself at the end, so I should pull it back a little bit. If I'm going slower than this, I'm starting to, like, lose goals. So here's your operating zone, land in there, and work with perceived effort within that range.
Yeah.
So I started drifting off on the slow end going into the 40th mile, and that confirmation of seeing those slower splits show up on the screen was kind of like planting that seed of doubt of like, okay, maybe this isn't the day. Maybe it actually wasn't my goal race for that half of the year. So I had that other additional kind of like, well, you could just have a strong 100-miler and use it as like a training session for the next race, and all the typical stuff.
Yeah.
And then I remember, for whatever reason, I didn't plan this or come in with this as like as a bullet point to reference, but I remember thinking, well, I'm running on an indoor track that is climate controlled at 55 degrees. And at the time, it was potentially just a one-off event. So, like, I don't have another shot at this environment where I have total temperature control on a short loop like this. So rather than, like, conceding 40 miles into a 100-miler, maybe just get back on pace for 2 more miles and see what that feels like. Because really, like, even if it was game over for me, I could do 2 miles in range.
Yeah.
So I sort of, like, reframed it as, like you said, coming back into the moment.
Yeah.
But also, rather than leaning into the negative side of it, kind of saying like, well, what can I do now versus what do I have to do for the next 60 miles?
Yeah.
And then also appreciating like the opportunity where it's like, I could be outside. It could be 75 degrees.
Yeah.
It could be the sun beating down on me. There could be a wind. It could be raining, but it's not, because it can't inside. So I've got this like opportunity. And I think like those things all lined up in a way to kind of show me that sort of perspective, and like, and that tool that you can kind of use or those series of tools, I guess, that you can use to sort of navigate those spots. And then you start to learn that, and then you realize like, okay, I can dig deeper into this discomfort when it comes up, or clear more of those hurdles than I normally would, and then ultimately have a better performance. So then you can also play the fun game where you reflect back on past races where you're like, what if I had learned this lesson back then, what would I have done? Which isn't necessarily the game you want to play, other than looking at those as, okay, those were steps that led me towards learning this when it worked.
Absolutely.
And then without them, maybe I don't get there anyway. So you can't necessarily like go back and start playing the what if game either.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great story. I love that. I think gratitude is such a powerful weapon when you're there.
Yeah.
Even in Antarctica. I mean, I get to choose my suffering.
Yeah.
That's a privilege.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Yes, I worked very, very hard for it, but there's many in the world who don't even get the luxury to choose because they're thrust into some of the hardest conditions we can fathom. And so remembering that out there, that I'm grateful I get to experience that place. To experience that level of solitude in this majestic land is truly a privilege. And that's one thing I didn't really struggle with at all, was the isolation out there. I thrived on it. I loved it. It was such a blessing to experience that. You never get to experience that level of isolation in the normal world, So that in and of itself was a real privilege that I was very, very grateful for. And I think just bringing that back, that no matter how bad things are, it could always be worse. And celebrating that for a moment it gives you good perspective and brings you back into the now, which is ultimately the only thing that's real.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting when you say it like that, like we choose our suffering with these things. It's like, yeah, I mean, it could be not that long ago where you're on the East Coast and you're packing up a Calistoga wagon and heading out west trying to go thousands of miles
exactly.
in a wooden wagon.
Exactly.
And you have to some degree because like you don't have any other opportunities outside of that. So it's an interesting... the framework's just different. You wonder what people's mindsets were like back then, where they didn't see it as like, all right, I'm going to like place this challenge on me so I can actually feel alive to some degree in a modern society where there's a lot of comforts that are a blessing that we have. but like that, you don't go back very far before those weren't there, and
Yeah.
people were doing this as a way of existing. Just a quick reminder that Delta G ketones is my go-to exogenous ketone source. You can get 20% off at deltagketones.com when you use promo code BITTER20. Check out my full description of how I use Delta G ketones at the end of the episode.
And to your point about the comforts of modern society, that's I think to make that whole concept of the paradox of oneness actionable. One of the things I always do, and people I work with I recommend do, is look for a duality causing you friction and go play on the other edge of it. So why is this now movement, or if we're seeing, of embracing discomfort? Because we're so comfortable.
Yeah.
So seek out discomfort, seek out pain. But I see it sometimes now go the other edge where people are saying comfort is the enemy. Comfort inherently is not the enemy. They both are, neither is bad or good. They both can coexist. What makes discomfort valuable is comfort, and vice versa. So even for me, I remember many, many, many years ago, I was out running and I saw this sign that said 5K fun run. And I had this visceral sense of disgust at the idea of a fun run. You know, you can't be running for fun. Every run should be an exercise in suffering. Otherwise, you're wrong. And that wasn't a healthy way. I realized at the time, because I'd gotten so good at playing on the edge of suffering, that I was creating suffering in all areas of my life. And that's actually when this concept, or this idea, was birthed of this duality. I didn't have it as crystallized and fully conceptualize it the way I do now. But in some sense, even looking back, my whole book, Fear and Nirvana, two seemingly contradictory ideas that are in fact complementary, and they can work together. And so that's what I started doing. Is I struggled with joy, so I started going for fun runs. Didn't care about time, just being out there, doing more light and playful things. And by playing on the edge of joy, not only did I develop new mental weapons to navigate the hardship, it just made life more fulfilling, because it's pain that makes pleasure valuable, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So playing on all edges adds flavor to life.
Yeah, and to some degree, I think that sort of background thought process plays a role in your psyche. So like if you start associating ultramarathon or running or exercise as always suffering, then eventually your brain is going to start associating this thing of this resistance to it, because like we're going to seek comfort to some degree.
Yeah.
So then
that makes sense.
You reframe the narrative by going to the 5K fun run and reminding yourself, hey, this is actually fun. I can enjoy this. There's no pressure here. And then your brain probably starts reassociating this as an activity that can also bring joy and happiness, and it's not all just delayed gratification all the time.
Absolutely. It's all part of the human experience, and you want to play on all those edges. You can't have light without darkness. You know, if you think about when you're standing on top of a mountain, why is there something low? Because you're high. You know, otherwise it's all flat. So you need a valley for a summit to exist. And I don't just mean literally, figuratively in life. And I think a lot of times I see people are so scared to leap off a cliff, and for the fear of falling, for the fear of pain. And as a result, you never really experience the highs of life. You know, if you don't know to really experience the heights of awe, you have to explore the depths of the abyss. And that's the value in playing on that edge of pain, whether it be physical, sitting in a dark room, or going into some abyss, the spiritual abyss, the physical abyss. But as a result, you'll get to know more about the heights of awe, that what Joseph Campbell called the rapture of being alive. And you get to feel that more fully. That's what makes life so much more flavorful.
Yeah. And what did you say the name of your next book is?
The tentative name is going to be Step Into the Storm.
Step Into the Storm, okay. Yeah. Is that, how far along in the process are you?
Very early.
Okay, so we got to wait a bit.
I just got back. I haven't even fully framed out the table of contents yet. Just creating a structure. The general structure of the book will be the before, during, and after of a hard thing, and guiding people through more framework. So my first book, Fear was essentially about how do you build a muscle of courage. Courage is the most important virtue. Without courage, as Maya Angelou put it more beautifully than I would, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So to do anything you want in life, you need courage. To go out the door when you don't feel like going out the run. To walk up to that girl or that man at a bar, it takes courage. To start that business, to write the book, anything. To raise a child. I'm terrified of having kids. Yeah. All of that requires courage. So with courage, is the foundation from which every other virtue can be practiced consistently. So Fearvana was about building that muscle of courage. This next one is more now getting a little bit more granular, and how does one do the hard thing? So the 3 sections of the book, this is pretty much as far as I've gotten, starting to build out the table of contents now, but is the agoge, so which is the Spartan training ground, so that's the before, the arena, the during, and then the aftermath, the after. Because I think that's something that's also not talked about. And Michael Phelps did a great job of this in the documentary on Netflix. I think it was called The Weight of Gold, about how Olympic athletes go through mental health struggles.
Yeah.
Whether you win gold or not, there's a down that comes as a result of that. You know, and I can relate to it in many ways. You spend 4 years training for a craft. Whether it goes the way you want or not, what do you now do with your life a little bit? So navigating that, it doesn't have to be a long down, but you feel those moments and then moving through it. So helping people navigate those 3 phases of before, during, and after of any extended hard thing. So it's not just about doing a hard thing once. Almost anybody can do that in a glimpse of motivation, right? Something happens, you get motivated, I'll go in that cold tub once or whatever it may be. But how do you keep doing hard things? So the tentative subtitle of the book is How to Keep Doing Hard Things to Get the Results You Want.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll be looking forward to read that when it comes out.
Do you have
have you imposed a timeline on yourself?
I have, yes. The goal is definitely to finish writing it in the next 6 to 8 months. My first book, Fearvana, because it was my first book ever. I was new to writing. It took me 3 years. There was 100% some procrastination. There was tons of research that went into it. But it also, because it took me so long, I almost rewrote the whole book. Because I had evolved as a person. So I almost wrote 2 books to get that one book out. So this book, I will not do the same thing.
You know what you're doing now.
Like always, you learn from life experience. So this book will 6 to 8 months, and then the goal is to get it out by next year. It'll take with publishing and everything, because I'm not self-publishing it, going with a publisher, and then to get it out next year. But then over the next 6 to 8 months, that's my primary focus, is to write and finish the core structure of the book. But that's also been a big learning for me since Fearvana, coming back to that notion of the duality. In Fearvana, everything was defended by research, every point. You know, there's so much research that went into it, so many scientific studies. And not that that's bad, but since writing that book in my own evolution, I've found beauty on playing on the paradox, on the duality of not just science, but spirituality, not just control, but surrender, embracing the mysticism of the universe. There are questions we don't have answers to, and that's a beautiful thing. You know, so I was practicing and embracing mysticism, and the way I made that concrete to make it actionable, I remember I would go around, and anytime I had something in life that, I'm sure we can all relate, there's those moments you're like, how did that happen? How did the number of stars that had to align for this moment in time to play out this way? I would write it down as evidence of the mysticism of the universe, to prove to my mind, to prove to a mind that needed reasons, that was very controlling, that to be embraced to the surrender of mysticism. And now I've done that a lot more. So this book will be, while there'll be research, it'll be more about not only my own anecdotes, but sharing from others, and from a little bit more of that lens of surrender and mysticism, and embracing that in the human experience.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward to that coming out next year.
Thank you.
Some more delayed gratification, I guess.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, it's been great to have you back on the show.
It's such a privilege. I'm so grateful to spend the time with you.
Yeah, no, it's fun to catch up. But where I know you mentioned a couple times, but where's the best spot to kind of find you online?
So Instagram is my primary social media platform, at Fearvana. And the book is on paperback, Kindle, Audible, and on my website, Fearvana, I mentioned to have some resources to help people move through not only pain, but wherever we are on whichever point of our journey, whether we're struggling on the depths of PTSD, suicidal ideation, addiction, to the heights of mastery. I've been blessed to have gone through that gamut in my life, so sharing different resources and tools to guide people through wherever they are on their journey.
Very cool. Yeah, I think the 25 tools for the pain cave, I think, will be an interesting one.
That was fun to put together and to crystallize some of the lessons from not only myself, but learning from others like yourself into this framework to guide people through their own challenges.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking some time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your time here in Austin.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Take care.
Awesome.
Thanks for sticking around and listening to how I use the show sponsors. Maui Nui Venison is a product I discovered last year. What caught my eye was their quality and business model. They have paired the need to manage an invasive species with providing some of the most nutrient-dense meat you will find. The axis deer arrived in Maui in single digits but grew fast and have damaged the local ecosystem, and if left unchecked are projected to reach up to 200,000 in number in future years. Maui Nui decided to solve this problem and minimize waste. Axis deer meat provides 43% of your daily value of protein in just 107 calories and boasts a 1.5 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is the most balanced ratio of any red meat. This same 107 calories provides 22% of your daily value of vitamins and 37% of your daily value of minerals. They have a wide range of products including ground venison, leg medallions, rib chops, strip loin fillets, and loin chops. They also make a beef stick that includes an option with organ meats, which makes a perfect protein-packed snack that I will usually have in the afternoon before a strength session. I've also been enjoying the ground venison for dinner, usually paired with steamed vegetables or a sweet potato. You can find a bunch of recipes and ways to prepare their products on their website at mauinuivenison.com. Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte supplement. Based on my electrolyte loss rate of 614 milligrams per liter, I begin my day with half a packet of one of their hot beverage flavors with my morning coffee. I rotate through all of them, but my favorite at the moment is the chocolate mint. Later in the day, I have been having either a packet of their watermelon flavor or a can of Element Sparkling, which is their carbonated electrolyte drink. I usually have the black cherry lime or watermelon flavor for those. If you are curious about how to dial in your own fluid and electrolyte setup, check out episode 300 of this podcast, where I dive into some of the things you can do at home to gauge how much fluid and electrolytes you may need. A free sample pack with your first purchase can be found at drinklmnt.com/HPO. Delta G ketones is the best researched exogenous ketone supplement on the market. The research on exogenous ketones is constantly evolving. Delta G is responsible for much of it, hosting 50-plus published studies and 20-plus ongoing studies, and have received DARPA grants designed for special forces. Delta G uses ketone esters, which is unmatched in raising blood ketone levels when matched per gram. The best use case, as the evidence currently stands, is as a post-workout supplement for better recovery and or during longer, lower-intensity sessions to help with mental focus. For this reason, I will have a bottle of Delta G Performance, that's the little blue bottle, after my biggest workouts for the week and during long-run training sessions once I have been out running for about 45 to 60 minutes. Head over to deltagketones.com and enter BITTER20 for 20% off your next purchase. Curranz, which is spelled Curranz, is a pre-workout supplement that I started using this year based on the evidence that it can help improve blood flow, allowing for improved muscle oxygenation, which can potentially enhance endurance performance. It also can increase fat oxidation, reduce muscle damage, and delay fatigue. Black currants are rich in anthocyanins, a type of antioxidants which may contribute to their health benefits. The research suggests benefits can be seen after a week of usage pre-exercise. I take 2 capsules of currants before each morning training session. During longer races, I will be taking an extra 2 capsules every 4 hours. Currants has been used for lots of the research on black currants, so be sure to head over to curranzusa.com, that's CURRANZUSA.com, to check them out and the latest studies. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.